It's 11 at night and you're staring at a number on your phone. Negative $1,240. A credit card balance with a minimum payment of $35 due in 9 days. And here's the part nobody tells you. That $35 doesn't make the number go down. It barely slows it from going up. You feel it in your chest, that specific tightness, the one that shows up at night and disappears the second you walk into work the next morning and pretend everything is fine. You're not broke. You're not rich. You're somewhere in the middle, owing money. And you've just discovered the thing they never explained in school. Debt isn't one experience. It's a ladder. And depending on which rung you're standing on, the entire world treats you differently. Stick with me, because the way the game works at $1,000 is the exact opposite of how it works at $10 million. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Level 1, $1,000. This is the rung almost everyone starts on, so let's not pretend it's exotic. You owe $1,000, maybe spread across a card and a buy now pay later app that let you split a pair of sneakers into 4 payments like that was a financial strategy. The interest rate is something insane. 24, 29%. A number so high it would be illegal in some countries and is perfectly legal here because the people who owe $1,000 don't have lobbyists. At this level, the system has you exactly where it wants you. You're profitable. The bank loves you, not despite the debt, because of it. You make the minimum, you stay current, and you generate a steady little river of interest that costs them nothing. Here's the cold truth at level 1. The system isn't trying to get its money back fast. It's trying to keep you here as long as possible. You are the product. And the move, the actual move, is boring and unglamorous and works every single time. You stop adding to it. You throw everything at the highest rate first. You treat that $1,000 like a fire, not a roommate. Most people never do this. They make peace with it. That peace is the trap. Level 2, $10,000. Now the texture changes. 10 grand isn't a sneaker mistake, it's a car repair, a medical bill, a couple of months where the income stopped and the bills didn't. At $10,000, you start getting mail, real mail, envelopes with words like pre-approved and consolidation printed in friendly fonts. And here's what's actually happening. You've crossed into a zone where the system smells opportunity. They offer to roll all your debts into one neat loan with a lower monthly payment. Sounds like rescue. Read it again. Lower monthly payment usually means longer term, which means you pay more over time. You just feel it less each month. That's the whole business. They're not selling you relief. They're selling you a smaller, more comfortable cage with a longer lease. At this level, you also discover the credit score game, that 3-digit number that decides whether you're treated like an adult. You learn that using 30% of your limit is fine and 90% gets you punished, that the system rewards the appearance of restraint more than restraint itself. The smart play at 10,000 isn't to feel ashamed. It's to get clinical. List every debt, every rate, every balance on one page. Most people are afraid to look at the total. The person who climbs out is the one who stares at it without flinching. Level 3, $100,000. This is where it stops being a personal feeling and starts being a structure. 100 grand of debt is a mortgage, a degree, a small business that didn't go the way the pitch deck promised. And here's the first genuinely interesting flip in the whole game. At $100,000, the conversation changes from how do you pay this off to what did this buy you? Because not all 6-figure debt is the same animal. $100,000 on credit cards is a slow-motion catastrophe. $100,000 on a house in a city where rents are climbing is, in the system's eyes, an asset with a loan attached. Same number, completely different treatment. The bank that would never lend you $10,000 at a reasonable rate will happily hand you $300,000 for a property, because the property is collateral and you, the human, are almost beside the point. This is the secret hiding in plain sight. The system distinguishes between debt that consumes and debt that produces, and it prices them like they're from different planets. At $100,000, you start to feel the leverage flip in your favor for the first time. Your debt is large enough that the lender now has a stake in keeping you afloat. Miss a card payment at level 1 and they barely notice. Threaten to default on $100,000 and suddenly there are people whose job it is to keep you alive, because your failure is now their problem too. You haven't gotten richer, but for the first time, you've gotten leverage. And leverage, you're about to learn, is the entire game from here up. Level 4, $1 million. Say the number out loud and feel how it lands different. $1 million in debt. The version of you staring at that $1,200 card balance at 11 at night would hear that and feel sick. But here's the trick the whole ladder has been building toward. At $1 million, the fear inverts. You're not afraid of the debt anymore. They are. Picture it. You own a few buildings, or a company with payroll, or a portfolio of loans secured against things that throw off cash every month. The million isn't sitting on a credit card eating you alive at 29%. It's structured. It's at 4, maybe 5%, because at this level, the rate is a negotiation, not a sentence. You walk into the bank and you don't sit in the plastic chair waiting to be judged. There's a person who manages your relationship. They bring you coffee. They call you by your first name and ask about your kids. Read that again, because it's the exact same institution that wouldn't return your call when you owed 1,000. Nothing about you changed. The number changed. Here's the cold mechanics of it. When you owe the bank $1,000 and can't pay, that's your problem. When you owe the bank $1 million and can't pay, that's their problem. At $1 million, your default would land on their balance sheet, in front of their regulators, in their quarterly numbers. So they don't threaten you. They restructure. They extend. They work with you because keeping you afloat is cheaper than letting you sink. The man who owes 1,000 gets a collection call at dinner. The woman who owes $1 million gets a lunch invitation. And the move at level 4 isn't to be afraid of the size. It's to make sure every dollar of that million is tied to something that produces. So the debt pays its own interest and you keep the spread. That spread, the gap between what the money costs you and what it earns you, is where fortunes quietly live. Level 5, $10 million. Now you've left the world where debt is something you owe and entered the world where debt is something you wield. At 10 million, you don't borrow because you're short. You borrow because borrowing is cheaper than spending your own cash. This is the part that breaks people's brains the first time they see it. The richest people you know are often, on paper, deeply in debt, and they arranged it that way on purpose. You hold assets worth 30 million. You don't sell them because selling triggers tax and kills the thing that grows. Instead, you borrow 10 million against them at a rate so low it barely registers. And you live on that borrowed money, spend it, invest it, and pay almost nothing in tax because borrowed money isn't income. The asset keeps climbing. The loan sits there, quiet, secured, patient. You're using debt as a tool to never touch the principle that makes you rich. At this level, you have a team. Lawyers who structure, accountants who optimize, bankers who compete for your signature. The system that punished you for using 90% of a $500 limit now hands you 8 figures and calls it a privilege. Same system, same rules technically. But the rules were never written for the person at the bottom of the ladder. They were written by the people standing at the top, and they read very differently depending on where you're standing when you read them. And that's the thing you can't unsee now. It was never about the number. The number is just a position on a ladder, and the ladder decides everything: how they speak to you, whether they fear you or feed on you, whether the same word, debt, means a noose around your neck or a lever in your hand. At 11 at night, owing $1,200, you felt that tightness in your chest like it was a moral failure, like you'd done something wrong. You hadn't. You were just standing on the rung where the game is rigged hardest against you, where the interest is highest and the leverage is lowest and nobody brings you coffee. The people at the top aren't smarter, they're not better. They just figured out that the only thing that changes as you climb is who's afraid of whom. So look at that number on your phone again, not with shame, with a map. Because you've seen the whole ladder now, all the way up, and you know the secret they were counting on, you never learning. The goal was never to owe nothing. The goal was to climb high enough that the debt starts working for you instead of against you. The fire becomes the engine. You just have to stop making peace with the bottom rung. That tightness in your chest, it's not fear, it's the bottom of the ladder. And ladders go up.